Hi there, thank you. So there's another thing actually too that I have to share about myself. I'm actually really scared of public speaking, so it's actually pretty difficult to be up here. But part of what I want to talk about in my talk is kind of getting people to the edge of their comfort zone a bit. And sometimes amazing things happen when you're at the edge of your comfort zone. So I have to put myself there sometimes as well. So bear with me if I stumble over my words or screw things up. I can always answer questions too if I make some big mistake or something. Anyway, so yes, I'm an engineering manager at Hootsuite. If you haven't heard of Hootsuite, we're a social media marketing platform company. We're in Vancouver, Canada, so it's very likely I'll drop a couple A's throughout the talk. So Epic Champions. Epic Champions came out of an experiment that I ran in our engineering labs department. We wanted to try out things that we could empower developers with more, and so we kind of led ourselves into this Epic Champions this concept. So the talk today, I'm gonna keep things at a bit of a higher level and tell some of the stories about our developers and about kind of what Epic Champions is about. I'm not going to get too heavily into some of the tactical kind of stuff, but I can give more information on that stuff later. So one other thing before I move on here, I want to clarify the epic part of this because I think everybody, I've realized over time, has a bit of a different understanding of epic and the context around it. So when I'm saying epic in this talk, I'm really talking about features. So we use epics in Jira to track our features. Our epics are generally can be developed by a team in a couple of sprints, maybe up to 6 sprints or so. That's kind of the context and the size we keep epics in. So when I say epics, I'm talking kind of about features, so feature champions in a way too. Epic just sounds so much more epic. Moving on from there. So a big part of this talk is really about focused around empowerment. I believe empowerment is a super important thing. So the definition of empowerment in the English Oxford Dictionary is the authority or power given to someone to do something. Really small sentence with huge meaning behind it. Empowerment is so important because this is kind of getting people towards that edge a bit. If people are empowered, they'll put themselves into a place where they're challenged and where they're kind of pushing their comfort zone and trying new things out and learning a lot. And I think that we talk about empowerment a lot, but we don't really empower people enough. So this is kind of a big theme to this whole thing is empowerment. So I've got a story to tell here. This is a story of 2 developers who joined Hootsuite. So they come from really similar backgrounds. They both had experience doing like startup-y kind of work or consulting type of work. They both have a very similar experience base, like less than 2 years. They both have like this real drive in technology, and they're really brilliant guys. But they kind of take a bit of a different path. So the first is DA. We all call him DA. It's David DA. So DA started at Hootsuite, and in his first day at Hootsuite, we have this sort of this onboarding ritual that you go through some of your onboarding, and by the end of day 1, you should be pushing some kind of code to production. And so DA follows through this. He starts out, he meets his team, he pushes some code to prod. Everything's all good on day 1. Day 2, he comes in and he's like working through the bug backlog a bit, and he's working on some stuff. But the thing with DA is he started into a team that doesn't have this really great empowerment kind of model. They've got a fairly traditional structure with a lead and seniors, and a lot of the stuff that he's working on is stuff that is kind of the stuff that's left over a bit, stuff that doesn't really require much for decisions. So he's doing some of that stuff. Day 3, he's working with the team to do the backlog grooming stuff, and he's kind of learning the team and building trust with his team and kind of working on smaller things. So this kind of carries on for DA, and I'll kind of come back around to him a bit later. And this is George. So George started into the labs team where we're experimenting with Epic Champions. Again, same kind of background. He starts off day 1, same kind of way. He pushes code to prod. Everything's all good. Second day, very similar thing, meeting his team, getting to know people better. But day 3, something happened very differently for George. George is asked if he wants to volunteer to be the Epic champion to implement Instagram into our Amplify product. And this is a really big feature being asked for by a lot of our customers, a really kind of core piece going forward, and super important. And George is, he's a junior, and he's thinking, wow, this is a really big thing for me to take on. And he accepts to volunteer for this. He says, yeah, this is great. I'll take this on. I think I can get it done. He had some experience with Instagram in the past, and he had a ton of interest, and he's got really sharp technical skills. So George takes it on and learns the Epic Champions framework, and kind of starts running with this thing with the expectation that this feature gets delivered, and he's responsible for it. Pretty big task for your third day, eh? I set that one up. I had to. Anyway, switching gears a little bit, I'll come back to the story of the developers after. I want to talk a bit about hierarchy. So hierarchy is a really common thing. We see hierarchy all around us. So like just the crows in the tree here. We see it in companies. There's always the CEO and the executive level and the different levels of the company. And decisions are always kind of made throughout that hierarchy, and kind of the important decisions often are at the very top. The important strategic, visionary type decisions are often at that top, and decisions kind of go down that hierarchy, and it's really tactical kinds of decisions being made towards the bottom of that. And this isn't, I'm not saying this is a bad thing in any way, but this is what's really common for us to see. So in our development teams, we definitely had this hierarchy as well, and we still actually do. So we have our PM. I'm going to represent our PM and designer by the one person at the top there. We typically would have the PM designer working with a team lead or an engineering manager to be that triad to figure out how we're going to be building a feature, how to best implement something, what kind of technical problems, all that usual stuff we're used to. And as the team lead makes decisions and splits stuff up, they involve the senior developers. Our senior developers will further kind of break stuff down, work with the team and stuff, and kind of the decisions are made throughout the team, and they kind of work their way down, where intermediate and junior developers, co-ops, are kind of working on pieces of work, making kind of smaller micro decisions on how stuff gets implemented. And this is how we've done things for a really long time. So for me, this is actually something I was really used to too. In my career coming up as a junior developer and intermediate in different companies, I was always working in this kind of a framework. And it struck me a lot thinking about this, that when I was a junior developer, I had all this like technical angst in some ways. I had all this like ability to do these technical things and had all this energy. And I was, working on a lot of really things that I felt were kind of menial tasks. But I had to earn my keep. I had to build trust. I had to do all these things. And so it was just kind of the way it was for me, I guess. And I kind of realized, well, this is how it is for everybody. This is just normal. But as I became an intermediate, I was working on some more interesting projects. And as I worked my way to senior, I started making bigger decisions. And it felt like that whole process actually took a long time, and I felt like I had so much to offer that I never really was able to offer, but I just kind of always said, well, that's just how it is. This kind of stuck with me through my career and got me really thinking more about, well, what if I had have been given some bigger things to work on from the beginning? What if I had taken on some really challenging projects? So what we ended up doing in labs is we took the traditional model and we kind of flipped it upside down. So with this model, it's the same idea in a lot of ways, but at the top you have these epic champions across the board now, and these epic champions will actually become that sort of part of the triad, working with design and working with product. And the difference here is that instead of your senior developers being sort of a bottleneck for decision making and like work that's just got to get done, they're actually here now supporting the Epic Champions. Their job is really to provide that solid foundation. So when the Epic Champions have some kind of an issue working with product, or you need to make a really difficult technical decision, or maybe there's some kind of a political thing when they're working with their team trying to get something done, they have people to look to support them, which is kind of always the expectation of a senior, but usually the senior is doing that while they're running around ragged trying to figure out how to solve these other problems and build out the technical pieces for some project. So here the expectation is really that they're that foundation first, and instead of the technical implementer first. And then below this, we still have the team leads, providing a really, really important role of kind of keeping that structure together, making sure that process is being decided on by the teams, making sure that there's connections being built to external teams, all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of the same, but that's their focus now. Instead of like features first and team second, now it's team and support first, and that kind of goes all the way up to the Epic Champions. So the definition of Epic Champion that we've created, the Epic Champion is the owner of the implementation of an Epic. And it's kind of, we left out technical on purpose. It's more towards the technical side, but really the implementation all the way through is actually going to be owned by the Epic Champion. So it's a big responsibility. So some of the principles of an Epic Champion that are really important. So first thing, the Epic Champion is 100% accountable for delivery. So they own the feature from the very beginning, from ideation, working with the product manager on building requirements and specification, working with design on figuring out the best user experience. They're accountable to the very end for this thing being delivered. And like I say here, with great power comes great responsibility. So if you're a co-op or a junior, that might seem really scary, but that's part of what that foundation, that support structure is for. The Epic Champion is also the ultimate decision maker. They hold the decision-making power for the direction and the technical decisions and all that stuff. But they don't get to do that in a bubble. So we heavily use the advice process. A show of hands if who's heard of the advice process? No hands. Awesome. So I won't go too deeply into the advice process, but I'll give it in a nutshell. The advice process it's actually something that's got quite a lot of literature on the internet, so it's something I'd suggest taking a look at. It's quite an interesting read. In a nutshell, the advice process says that depending on the complexity of a decision, you should seek advice from your peers or from other people around you before you make that decision. So if the decision is, where are we going to go for lunch today? Well, that's not a very complicated decision. It doesn't probably affect a ton of people, not a lot of stakeholders. I mean, maybe you want to ask another person. If the decision is like we want to use Haskell to start writing microservices and we've never done that before, that's something you should ask a lot of people for advice on, and not even just in your own team. So if you're a junior developer and you're like, I think Haskell would be great for this microservice, you probably want to talk to your seniors. You probably want to talk to your architecture group. You probably want to ask advice from a lot of people before you go and throw down with that decision, because that's a big decision with a lot of implications. Anyway, in a nutshell, that's kind of the advice process, and we use it very heavily at Hootsuite to make decisions. Even when we decide if someone's going to go to a conference, we get people to seek advice from their peers to see why it would be best for them to go. So it's something that's really heavily used by us. The third principle, our developers volunteer. So we don't at any point ever push someone and say you're just doing this, because that kind of defeats the purpose of it. Developers 100% volunteer for the Epic Champion role, and they do it based on these three factors. So based on their interest, definitely, that's important. If someone's working on something and they're not interested, they're probably not going to really put the kind of effort in that really is required. People who are interested in something have a stake in making it really successful because they want to keep driving it forward. So expertise is a big thing. So in the case of George, he had some expertise with Instagram, and it made sense for him to use some of that expertise where the team didn't have any. And now expertise, you may have a problem to solve that no one has any expertise on in the team, and that is what it is. I mean, you just have to solve the problem. But if there's people that have expertise on that, it's usually helpful for them to volunteer. And then I think they're all really important, but really important too is capacity. I'd almost say most important. If someone's already flat out working on an epic, or they're working on some big project, or they're taking critical path of technical pieces of a feature for someone else, they probably are not at their best to be the epic champion at that point. They'll end up working themselves to a point of extreme stress. But I mean, there has been times where we've had a developer who's taking something on move into a different epic because they had some expertise and a ton of interest. So it's possible to kind of horse trade a bit. Capacity, though, is super important. You don't want people to get burnt out. So the epic champion is definitely the single point of contact. And this is something we kind of learned the hard way. So everybody needs to know who owns the epic. Because we had times, especially in the traditional model too, where someone like product or someone from an external team, there's that feature being built. Who owns it? And it's like, well, it's that team. So they go over and hey, so to the team, to some people in the team, hey, so what do you guys know about this feature? And they start getting different answers from different people, and they start to, you find that you can't have a single person on the team that's making a decision necessarily. Maybe the team lead who should know the most about it actually doesn't know much because the team's been working on it without the team lead there for whatever reason. So we found the single point of contact piece is super important. We need to know who the person is that's owning this thing and making those decisions, and everybody needs to know that. So we build on our roadmap where we have our roadmap with the different features on it. We put the epic champion right on there so everybody knows and it's super clear. The epic champion this is super important, must be the propagator of knowledge, not the hoarder. People think, okay, well, since I'm owning this thing and I'm accountable for delivery, I have to be the person who knows everything, and I have to be able to hold all this knowledge really close. And as this thing gets delivered, I probably have to be that expert and keep all that knowledge close. It's so far from the truth. The epic champion, they need to propagate that knowledge out to the team. They need to make sure that they're putting stuff into Confluence and they're writing comments in the Jiras, and they're really clear on the decisions they're making, why they're being made. It's okay for them to be the expert. They will end up being the expert in this. There's no way around that. But they can't be the hoarder of knowledge. That's super, super important. And another principle, this is kind of less of the epic champion, but is a principle of the process. Our seniors definitely have to be those team multipliers, and they have to be coached to be able to do that. So your seniors in your team, that's kind of, I've found in experience, that's their edge a bit. That edge is for them to be better mentors, better coaches, better force multipliers. They have a ton of experience. They know what they're doing, but they have a harder time bringing the rest of the team up to that level. And that's where they really need to kind of work on their skill sets further. And the challenge, I suppose, that really drives them forward. And this is super critical. The experience they have is critical to the team and to making things work. And if they're buried in technical nuances of features and stuff all the time, it's super hard for them to really be there to coach the team and to mentor and stuff. So that's really key. And we kind of got to this in an accidental way as well, where as intermediates and juniors and others were starting to take on the epic champion role, the seniors, I got pulled aside by one day, and he's like, hey, Tyler, I've got this problem. I used to do this. This was my job, and I don't know what my job is now. I don't know what I'm really supposed to be doing because everybody is doing the same thing as I was. And it kind of had this aha moment of oh, geez, I didn't realize that I didn't see that kind of happening, and I totally missed the super simple thing like that. And I said, no, you need to really keep being that coach to the team. You need to be making sure that the processes that we're using are efficient, that the super difficult technical problems are being solved, that people are being coached. And so we kind of learned it as a team by trial and error, but it was a really, really important lesson for us. So we have a few guidelines as well around epic champions. So first of all, we rotate our epic champions, and we're really cognizant of burnout. It's a stressful thing. I mean, can it show of hands developers in the audience? Okay, lots of developers. So when you're owning a big feature and it's taking multiple sprints, have you ever felt that burnout feeling? Hands up, whoever's felt burnout. Oh, all the developers who had their hands up before. Awesome. So burnout is for epic champions is like something we have to be really cognizant of. And so because of that, we rotate our Epic champions around. It's possible when you finish delivering a feature that you take on another Epic right away if you feel like you have the capacity. That's why that capacity for volunteering is important. But we definitely try to make sure that we rotate through the different developers on the team. And hopefully we can actually rotate through all of them, depending on if they want to volunteer or not. We also, it's perfectly acceptable for someone to take on the Epic Champion role, deliver a feature, and then just back away from it for a month or two. We had an example of a developer who took on this really big project to build out desktop. We're a mobile, so the Amplify app we were working on is a mobile-first app. We needed to build desktop for it. And he took that on as an epic, which was actually quite a large epic. Rallied the entire team, did a great job, delivered the thing. It was fantastic. And then he decided after that, he's like, I need a couple sprints to step back and just do some bug fixing and help the other devs on the team get their stuff done because holy shit, that was a lot of work. So anyway, that's something that we do. Is probably not completely required, but we found it's worked well for us. Another one is the Epic Champions might not actually code. They don't have to. In most cases for us, they are coding and they really like coding, but they don't have to. They can work with product and design and build out the specifications and make sure that the designs are all really succinct. And then they can actually work with the team in sprint planning stuff and backlog grooming to break everything down. And then they can let the team take it over and start owning the stories and coding it and just be a support for the team. We've had it in a couple of instances where the developer chose to do that and it worked really, really well. But often you'll find the developer at that point, it's their baby and they own this thing and they really just want to like code the hardest piece of it. So, and it's okay either way. But if you want to try this out and you find the developer saying, I don't really want to code this one, works fine. It can be good as long as they still support the team. And the third one here is we definitely prefer our juniors and intermediates as the Epic champions. And that seems kind of counterintuitive, but because of what I was saying with seniors, you need them to be that support layer. And if they're always owning the Epics and they're always being the people responsible for delivery, then they're not actually doing their best to provide that support to the team. And recently we started welcoming co-ops in this as well. We had a co-op join and take on a fairly substantial feature in his 4-month co-op term, and he delivered it and he crushed it and he did an amazing job. The key is that support from the rest of the team, but he did absolutely fine. It was scary a bit at first, thinking, okay, this guy's in university still, but he did awesome. So some of the benefits we've seen from Epic Champions, we've seen a productivity increase for sure. Now we haven't seen it in like velocity increasing on teams or things like that, but we've seen it in throughput. Because we have there are a bunch of developers working on different stages of epics, we kind of have this massive parallelization of the specification, design, the story breakdown work all happening at once. And because of that, we actually went from delivering a feature, say, every few sprints, to delivering like a feature almost every sprint. Like we would deliver in a quarter, I don't know, we could get 3, 4, 5 things done. Now we're seeing double the amount of features sometimes being delivered. It's pretty amazing. But I can't say that that's actually translated into like a measurable velocity increase or something like that. We don't have the numbers on that part yet. The second thing is the software quality. We've definitely seen our quality improve significantly. What we're thinking it's attributed to is the kind of killing that game of telephone, where in the traditional model we had specification requirements, things kind of filter their way down, and by the time the developer starts to work on something and make assumptions, they may not really have that full context, and they may sort of like misunderstand the requirement. Now with the Epic Champion working directly with product and with design, they can make decisions and understand the context really, really well at that point. And because of that, we've seen some quality improvements. We're also seeing, I'm forgetting my point. With the software quality, we're also seeing where we have issues before, where like design, a little story here, design wanted to put a little bouncing icon to represent a new feature. So customers, when they started using the product, they would see this right away and be intrigued to go check it out. What happened is the development team kind of down the road realized, well, this thing actually will take quite a bit of time to do because our framework and everything doesn't make it simple to bounce this little animation there. Look kind of cool. And by the time it actually got into sprint planning, the developer said, well, this is going to take about this much time, and it's actually not a trivial thing to do. And our product manager was like, I can't spend that much time on that. There's no value in that. And so catching these things earlier, as the Epic Champion will work closely with them to catch these things right in the very beginning instead of by the time it hits backlog grooming or planning. This helps to kind of improve our quality as well. We're delivering the best value we can efficiently now. And a huge benefit of this as well, of Epic Champions, is the accelerated career growth for our developers. So you take a junior developer and you get them to own a feature and you give them the support to make that thing happen, and they kill it and they do really well. It gives them all kinds of experience they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. That experience working with all these different people, that experience working with other people on other teams, all these things that they generally wouldn't be exposed to, they're now getting exposed to with a really good support network. And because of this, we found that after a few of these epics, some of our juniors are ready to level up, and our intermediates are moving at a faster rate. And they're all really happy about. Obviously, they're all really happy about that. They're constantly challenged, and they're seeing their career growth kind of accelerated there. But the most important benefit that we're seeing with Epic Champions is we have a highly engaged and empowered team. The feeling of the team has kind of changed. Everybody on the team is super empowered to make decisions. Everybody on the team is super engaged in conversations. When we go and sit in a room and we talk about some hard topic, people are all like diving in to add their points and having these really constructive conversations. We're not seeing any kind of hierarchy in the team, the way they talk or anything like that anymore. We're seeing everybody contribute, and that engagement is fantastic. On top of this, we're also seeing these super happy developers. Our survey scores for the developers on our team have just started creeping up like crazy in the last while, just because they're really happy with what they're doing. They're feeling this challenge, and they're feeling this engagement, and that's really probably driving things like productivity and stuff for us. So I get this question a lot. I had to address it here. So what about Scrum? I mean, Scrum is a process for organizing work, or I can't say a process, a framework for organizing work. How does Epic Champions step on the toes of Scrum or work with Scrum? The reality of it, looking at it, is Epic Champions really is just an add-on for Scrum. It works kind of completely alongside it and doesn't actually kind of violate any of the principles or the framework of Scrum. Actually, what we've even found looking at it deeper is that without Scrum, Epic Champions probably wouldn't really work either. For instance, people ask a lot, well, what if your junior developer taking on this feature goes rogue and just starts making decisions in a bubble and starts kind of flying away with this thing without talking to anybody? Well, that's where Scrum comes in. We stand up every day and we talk about what we're doing, what we did yesterday, what we're doing today. And you'll spot that developer because they'll say, yesterday I was working on Instagram. Today I'm working on Instagram. That's a red flag. So what you do at that point is you dive into it with them and, well, what part? And what were you doing? What decisions are you making? And that daily stand-up, that touch point really helps us kind of see what's going on and helps us kind of keep steering that team and make sure that we can be good support for them. We still do all our sprint planning. We still do all our backlog grooming. We still do our retrospectives and our sprint reviews. All these things still happen the same way. We just kind of do them where there's kind of the Epic Champion explaining some of the stuff they're doing or kind of taking a bit more of a direct role in it. But everything's still the same, and the process wouldn't work without it. So anyway, back to our developers. So we've got DA and we've got George, and it's a few months later now. So DA, a few months later, he's worked on some bigger pieces of work, and the team has kind of farmed off some stuff to him that needs to get done, and it's got some value to it. But meeting with DA in a one-on-one, he said to me, he's like, I like what I'm doing. I feel like I'm building trust with the team. My team's great, and I really like everything. But I feel like I can contribute more. I feel like I have a lot more to give to the team, and I feel interested, but only like kind of it's a kind of a mediocre interest in things. He's not leaving, but he's not really feeling super happy. On the other side, we've got George, who actually released the Instagram feature and got to stand up on the stage with the team that worked with him and present it to the company in our weekly all hands. And Instagram in Amplify has gone out to be this really widely received feature, and customers love it, and they're providing all this feedback. And he's proud that he saw that thing through and he built it, and he led the team to build it, and he was empowered to make decisions. And he's just super excited about the next thing he gets to work on, and he's super engaged in the team. And things are totally different for George than they are for poor DA. And I think that it goes back to this empowerment. We showed trust to George from the very beginning to make decisions, and we empowered him to see these features through and see Instagram through. And it kind of comes back in the way he interacts with the team. And George is on this amazing path where his happiness level is super high, and he's just looking for the next big challenge he can take on. And so we know there that it's definitely been a success for us. So thank you very much for listening to my talk. I didn't get into the tactical details of like how to roll this out with your teams, how to manage the process as an engineering leader, any of that kind of stuff. There's a lot to talk about there, and I'm happy to answer more questions if anybody wants to talk about it. I think the biggest takeaway, if anybody wants to look at this for their teams, is take that empowerment and that trust part of it away. Think about how you could trust your developers to do more and to push them to their edge and test their edges of their comfort and make sure that you can support them. And yeah, I think you'll find amazing things from your developers if you empower them. Thank you.